This podcast is a cinematic experience based on true medical and historical events. While every scene is rooted in fact, some scenes and dialogue have been dramatized for storytelling. You'll hear immersive sound design and special effects created to bring these moments to life, some of which may be intense or emotionally difficult. Listener discretion is advised, especially for younger audiences. The sun hangs like molten copper over Northern Virginia. The heat is suffocating, heavy, wet, and relentless. Across miles of scorched earth, thousands of men lie shattered in the dust. This is Second Bull Run. A wounded Union Army lieutenant drags himself toward a patch of shade under a broken fence rail. He's been shot in his spine, and now he can't walk. His lips are cracked, and his canteen is empty. He doesn't even know what time it is, only that the sun has risen and fallen more than once since he was shot. Across the field, a wagon approaches quickly. Certainly not a medical wagon, nor a rescue team, but a civilian driver hired by the Army to pick up the wounded from the battlefield. Earlier that morning, J.E.B. Stuart's Confederate cavalry had swept behind the Union line, slashing their way through supply trains, capturing ambulances, and dragging terrified civilian drivers away as prisoners. Stuart's riders were fast, aggressive, and everywhere at once. Some wagon drivers had been shot from their seats. Others had simply vanished. The wounded lieutenant raises his arms, trying to call out for help, but his throat is too dry for sound. Their eyes meet. The driver sees him. There's no doubt about that. But fear swallows whatever humanity he might have left. He thinks, if Stuart's cavalry is watching, if they're waiting to ambush another wagon, then stopping is suicide. He turns his head, snaps the reins, and flees, choosing his own safety over anyone else's survival. The wounded lieutenant watches his one chance of survival vanish into the shimmering distance. But he's not alone. Nearby, two men roam the field. They aren't medics. They're not there to help him in any way. They are scavengers. They move from body to body with the casual indifference of men picking through a rummage sale. One of them strips a wounded private of his boots.
Officers always have something worth taking,
says one of the men as he rifles through the pockets of a fallen sergeant. The lieutenant, barely conscious, whispers,
"Water, please help me."
One of the looters looks down at him with annoyance and shoves him aside with his boot.
"Should have died quicker, sir,"
he says sarcastically, and reaches for the lieutenant's brass belt buckle. 3,000 wounded souls lie here, some begging, some praying. All of them are dying, abandoned by the very army sworn to protect them. This isn't how it was supposed to be. The dead left to rot in the scorching sun. This is failure. Catastrophic, shameful failure.
Hundreds of miles away, in a canvas tent lit only by a single oil lamp, Jonathan Letterman, a surgeon in the Union Army, sits alone. The flame trembles in the stagnant night air, casting a puddle of dim light across the casualty reports scattered over a rough, wooden table. He wipes the sweat from the back of his neck with a filthy rag as he rifles through the pages and then stops. One report freezes him where he sits. It reads, Lieutenant, gunshot wound to the spine. Found alive at dusk by a regimental surgeon. Unable to walk, unable to be safely moved. Found deceased at first light. Cause of death? Exposure. Letterman looks closer at the nearly illegibly scrawled note, covered in blood and mud and the grime of war. Prioritized the less injured. Prioritized to send the carts back to him. The carts reported back that they were unable to reach him. A lieutenant. Spinal wound. Conscious, thirsty, and in pain. Left behind with a promise that never came true. A soul found alive when the guns went silent. Endured the scavengers roaming in the field. Alive through the night. Dead at dawn. Not from the bullet lodged in his spine. He died because the system promised rescue but delivered him up to abandonment in the harsh elements of the night on a desolate battlefield. Letterman exhales slowly, not with grief so much as the focused anger of a surgeon who knows a patient died from something utterly preventable, and it isn't the first time he's seen this. He remembers hauling water for miles because the latrines were dug too close to the water supply and entire companies of soldiers were wasting away from cholera and dysentery, never once seeing the enemy. This was death by neglect. Death by a system too sick to save its own. He closes his eyes, not to shut out the horror, but to see it more clearly. Because most surgeons, these reports would be a tragedy. To Jonathan Letterman, they are a diagnosis. The Army is his patient, and a gravely ill one at that. Letterman runs a dirty hand down his face, exhausted, but more awake than ever. He understands the situation with absolute clarity. A broken body may die, but a broken system can be rebuilt. He pushes his wavy hair to the side, out of his face, scoots his chair closer to the desk, and begins sketching the first bones of a medical system no army on earth has ever attempted. Despite his pedigree, Letterman was not born to amputate in tents or chase glory on battlefields. He was born to fix the failures that kill men who would have lived. To save lives through structure, not heroism. And tonight, under the weak glow of a single oil lamp, he understands the truth with absolute clarity. If he does not act, the army itself will die the way its wounded just did. Thirsty, abandoned, and left for scavengers.
The foundations of EMS weren't laid in classrooms or city halls. They were forged on the battlefield, where survival meant moving the wounded fast, improvising care, and learning what worked under fire.
But it didn't stay there. Those lessons bled into the civilian world. Cardiac ambulances rolling through city streets, Freedom House proving what trained paramedics could do, and a white paper that demanded America wake up to its failures.
Piece by piece, the fragments came together. Military medicine, public health, local experiments, each one adding to the system that we know today.
It was messy, uneven, and sometimes overlooked, but out of it came the foundation of modern pre-hospital care.
I'm Evan.
And I'm Sophie.
This is Past Medical History.
The story of EMS.
Long before the Civil War summons him, Jonathan Letterman grows up in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania, a town caught between the hush of farmland and the first rumblings of industry. In the mornings, coal smoke hangs low over the rooftops. Shopkeepers sweep their stoops while wagon wheels clatter down muddy streets. Children chase one another between the rows of brick houses, their laughter rising through the fog. It is a place both small and vast. Small in its routines, vast in its expectations of the young men born there. Letterman is a quiet boy, observant. When other children play in the muddy streets of Canonsburg, Jonathan lingers at the edge of the noise, not withdrawn, but absorbing. He watches how arguments start, how groups form, how they fall apart, who leads, who follows, and which boys always seem to end up hurt at the bottom of the pile. When other students memorize lessons to satisfy their teachers, Jonathan asks why the fever took one family and spared the one next door, why the coal miners at the south end of town grew sick more often than the ones up near the ridge, why the same illness ravaged one household and barely touched another. When other boys mimicked their father's trades with toy hammers and wooden rifles, Jonathan quietly rearranges the jars in his father's apothecary cabinets by size, by ailment, by frequency of use. Not for fun, but because the cabinet makes more sense that way. Some might call his behavior aloof, but in reality, he is measuring the world. Its frictions, its failures, its rhythms. Noticing the patterns that everyone else steps over. He grows up in the orbit of a father who is a physician, steady, unsentimental, a man who keeps his instruments polished and his ledgers precise, his decisions clean and unhurried. Jonathan learns early that illness follows patterns, that suffering is not mystery but mechanism, that even heartbreak has a structure if you know where to look. His father never romanticizes medicine. He doesn't tell stories of saved lives or noble sacrifices. He teaches Jonathan something else entirely. Discipline, routine, and observation. The things that hold chaos at bay.
As a young man, Jonathan studies medicine in Philadelphia, a city alive with clattering streetcars, crowded wards, and the relentless churn of urban diseases. Even with all the sickness and injury in the coal mines, it cannot match the scale of suffering he sees here. Nobody is suffering from black lung or blast injuries. He watches cholera and typhoid fever take whole neighborhoods, fevers thinning entire families in a week. While his professors are teaching how to treat these illnesses, Letterman wants to know how they happened in the first place. If there is something that can be done before the patient arrives in the hospital, before actually getting sick. Treat the sick, yes, absolutely. But why not prevent it from happening altogether? He began doing what came natural to him. Observation, analysis. What he found was this: poor sanitation, contaminated wells, overcrowded wards, misallocated resources. Where other students focus on anatomy in lectures, Letterman watches over the city itself as if it was a patient in the ward. Its arteries of commerce, its circulation of people, its organization of governance. He notices that illness isn't random, It follows paths through homes and neighborhoods, the way water finds every crack in a poorly built dam.
A child falls sick in a tenement, and by week's end, the whole block is coughing. A contaminated well poisons 3 streets but leaves the next untouched. A fever moves through factory workers with brutal precision because the shifts run long and the ventilation runs poor. Jonathan doesn't just observe disease. He fills pages and pages with his notes and observations. His notebooks filled with small, precise handwriting, mapping out who fell sick, who recovered, conditions he found. Details so intricate that you could almost see what he was writing about in front of you. To Jonathan Letterman, medicine becomes engineering, a way of understanding how environments, habits, structures, and decisions determine who gets sick, who stays well, and who dies long before their time. But there's only so much a young doctor can change in a city. Philadelphia is sick. Its neighborhoods are sick. Its systems are sick. And Jonathan is a man built not for small problems, but for big ones.
So when the U.S. Army offers medical commission to promising young surgeons, he doesn't just see a battlefield. Not adventure, not glory, but scale. Here is a place where sickness spreads through thousands, not dozens, where sanitation, discipline, supply, and structure determine the fate of entire regiments, where patterns of disease are written across whole companies at once, where a doctor doesn't just treat a patient, he treats a system. And in that structure, Jonathan Letterman sees possibility. He doesn't join the Army to chase medals, but because it is the first institution he has ever seen big enough, broken enough, and important enough to demand the mind he has. It seems like his whole life has been training for this assignment. All of those quiet moments of observation and years of tracing cause and effect, it has all been for this. When he signs his commission, he believes he is taking on a medical practice, but he has no idea that he is stepping in to cure the greatest patient of his career, the Army itself.
When Jonathan Letterman assumes the post of medical director of the Army of the Potomac, he does not revolutionize anything on day one. He walks from tent to tent, from the ambulance yard to the supply depot. He's trying to get a sense of the systems that are in place, or the lack of them. The hospitals seem to be overcrowded, and he sits down with surgeons who haven't slept in 2 days, discussing the successes and the failures, what's working for them, what's broken. They tell him that stretcher bearers struggle with no training and no direction, that the carts picking up the injured from the field often arrive too late or never arrive at all. What he observes is not battlefield failure, it's organizational failure. At night, under a dim lamp, he writes, just like he did in Philadelphia. Page after page of observations, patterns, maps of regimental placement, evacuation routes, the distances between field hospitals and the front lines. His notebook is filled with the keen awareness of a man who intends to understand a problem from its roots. He evaluates the Army as if he was assessing a patient, trying to uncover the signs and symptoms that would indicate clogged arteries or failing organs, and slowly, painfully slowly, he identified the disease. The Army is not dying from enemy fire. It's dying from its own disorganization.
Only when the diagnosis is clear does Letterman begin to implement a course of treatment. Not with medication or scalpels, with orders, precise, measured, and ultimately radical. He removes ambulances from the Quartermaster Corps, the same officers who lost control of them at Second Bull Run when the lieutenant with a bullet in his spine died of exposure while the carts drove away in fear. He places them under the direct command of the medical care unit, his unit. It is the first major incision in the diseased body of the Army. Then he creates something no American force has ever seen, the Ambulance Corps. Not teamsters, not civilian drivers, not men who can flee at the sound of gunfire. No. These are soldiers, trained, uniformed, supervised by officers, drilled like infantry. Each division receives a fleet of standardized wagons, with each wagon carrying stretchers, bandages, surgical instruments, horses assigned solely for the wounded. No boots, no ammunition, no excuses.
But Letterman isn't finished. He's stopped the Army's bleeding, but almost like a tourniquet instead of surgery. What he knows for sure is that definitive care will be a system of tiered care. But what he doesn't know just yet is that what he is creating will become the backbone of modern emergency medicine that you and I are familiar with today. Tier 1, the field dressing station. These are deployable close behind the line to stop the bleeding, stabilize the shock. Do it fast. Do it now. Tier 2, the field hospitals. Here the surgeons work in teams. Here operations happen immediately, where the most skilled hands treat the greatest wounds, hands not defined by their rank or seniority, but by their competence. Tier 3, the general hospitals. These are dozens of miles away, designed for recovery, not crisis. Patients are transported by wagon or rail after stabilization, as the patient is moved from the field dressing stations to the field hospitals. This is the first true trauma system on American soil. This is a system designed by a man of keen observation and in the spirit of Laray's ideas, adopted for a new century, built on American ground, in American mud, and in American blood. And then, as if summoned by fate, comes the test. Antietam.
September 17th, 1862. Antietam Creek. The sun rises over fields of corn, so tall it swallows whole men. The morning is quiet. The kind of quiet that only exists in the seconds before something terrible happens. Suddenly, the sound of cannons roaring, guns reporting, and soldiers yelling through smoke. What follows is 12 hours of slaughter so vast, so unrelenting, that even seasoned veterans agree hell itself could not have been worse. At the cornfield, volleys tear through men's chests, straight through to their spine. Regiments fire so close that the muzzle flash scorches the coats of the men standing shoulder to shoulder. Bodies fall in rows, so dense you could walk the field without touching the ground. At the sunken road, later called Bloody Lane, the dead stack 3 deep. Men slip in blood, some drown in it, and at Burnside Bridge, the creek runs red. 23,000 casualties in a single day. The wounded lie everywhere, in corn rows, in ditches, under fence rails, on the open road. Some are still gripping their rifles. Some are missing limbs or faces. All of them missing hope.
This is the day Jonathan Letterman's system faces its first trial, and the timing couldn't be any crueler. The smoke is so thick it turns the sun orange. You can't tell friend from enemy until they're nearly touching. Horses collapse from exhaustion, pulling wagons through mud so deep a person could get lost beneath it while standing. The ground is carpeted with the dead and those who soon will be. Letterman's system moves, it bends, it strains, but it does not break. The new ambulance corps runs in practiced lanes under fire. They lift men from the fields in coordinated sweeps, platoons of stretcher bearers trained like infantry, not the panicked civilians of Bull Run. And they fight for the fallen. No man will be left behind today. Field dressing stations bloom like lifeboats across the battlefield. Tourniquets snapping tight. Bandages soaking through in minutes. Surgeons shouting orders over the cannon thunder. Surgeons shouting orders over the cannon thunder. At the field hospitals, surgeons are working by lantern light at noon because the smoke from the battle is so dense that daylight can't illuminate their work. History shows records of surgeons performing more amputations that day in 8 hours than they had done in the previous 5 years. Others tie off arteries until their hands cramp, but they refuse to stop. Every few minutes another stretcher arrives, then another, and another, then 50 more. It seems impossible to keep up with, and yet because of Letterman's system, they do. By the next morning, every single Union wounded man had been removed from the field. Something no American army had ever accomplished before. Grant would later call it miraculous. Others would call it impossible. But Letterman knew the truth. It wasn't a miracle. It was organization. Organization bought with sleepless nights, endless notes, and a furious obsession with no man dying as they wait for help that would never come.
When the battlefield is finally still, the ground is so torn and bloody that reporters describe it as the most shocking single scene of war that they have ever seen. Letterman walks the perimeter at dawn. Past men bandaged head to toe, past mountains of amputated limbs outside the surgical tents, past survivors who look at him with hollow eyes of men who understand they should be dead. And for the first time, Jonathan Letterman sees proof. His system works. It doesn't save everyone. It cannot stop war, but it can stop the dying that comes after the guns fall silent. Under Letterman, ambulances move like clockwork. Stretcher bearers sprint their rehearsed routes. Field stations stabilize. Field hospitals operate through the night. And by the next morning, every single Union wounded man had been removed from the field. This had never been done, but it can happen again because he created a system that worked. At Fredericksburg, the army breaks. The battle is a catastrophe, a slaughter, but the medical system, it holds. Letterman's system moves like a living organism, wounded pouring inward, supply flowing outward, surgery happening immediately, evacuation happening without chaos. Even Confederate officers admire the order. And then comes Gettysburg, the largest battle on American soil. 3 days of carnage, thousands wounded, thousands more dying. Letterman builds Camp Letterman, the first large-scale, centralized medical encampment in the U.S. Union and Confederate wounded are treated side by side. The system improves triage, logistics, sanitation, and record keeping. Surgeons are assigned to patients by skill level, supplies distributed by need. And mortality drops dramatically. The Army has never seen anything like it, and neither has the world.
By 1864, Congress passes the Ambulance Corps Act, making his system law and changing American battlefield medicine forever. In 2 years, Jonathan Letterman rewired the nervous system of the United States Army through order, structure, and the belief that preventable death is a moral failure, not a hidden cost of war. His systems outlive him. His footprint stays in every field hospital, every evacuation chain, every trauma protocol for more than a century. When the Civil War ends, the Army demobilizes, hospitals shrink, and the ambulance corps dissolves. Jonathan Letterman resigns and returns to civilian life. But the system he built is just getting started. It lives in textbooks and in the habits of young surgeons who watched his ideas save lives under cannon smoke. It settles into the memory of the Army that learned organization is the difference between a soldier going home or going to their grave. 80 years later, the world turns violent again. A young surgeon in New Orleans, named Michael Ellis DeBakey, pores over the failures of past conflicts. And he sees something unmistakable. Letterman. Everywhere.
War and technology evolve, but the geometry of survival remains the same. Time plus organization equals life. In Korea and Vietnam, helicopters turn minutes into survival. Patients who once waited hours to reach surgeons reach them in 15 minutes. Casualties that would have been fatal become survivable. Doctors begin to speak of a mysterious window, a short span of time where interventions can change fate. The golden hour. It's a phrase that didn't exist in Letterman's system, but a truth he built his entire system around. And in Baltimore, a surgeon named R. Adams Cowley picks up that torch. He builds the world's first trauma institute. He puts helicopters on rooftops. He insists that rapid, organized, coordinated care is the only moral response to sudden injury. Cowley doesn't know Letterman personally, but he knows Letterman's ideas because the ideas never died. Modern emergency medical services are part of the inheritance of those ideas. Laurie taught the world to bring care to the wounded. Letterman taught the world to organize that care. DeBakey taught the world to accelerate it, and Cowley taught the world to guard the hour that decides life and death. This lineage is the backbone of modern EMS. Tiered care, trained responders, standardized equipment, protocol-driven action, rapid evacuation. These things did not appear by accident. They were born on battlefields, sharpened in wars, refined and applied to the civilian world, and carried today by every paramedic who answers the call.
Next time, we'll follow that thought into a new century. To a surgeon who took Letterman's blueprint, put it under a microscope, and changed the very speed at which modern medicine can move.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Past Medical History, the story of EMS. If you did, it would mean the world to us if you took a moment to rate and review the show wherever you're listening. Your feedback helps others discover these stories and keeps us inspired to share more. Know someone who loved this episode? Send it their way and help us grow the conversation. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at PMHX Podcast for behind-the-scenes updates and announcements about our first season. Stay tuned for release dates and more exclusive content. Past Medical History, the The Story of EMS is a Nova Sequence Studios production in association with Long Pause Media, a division of Flightbridge Ed. Music by Wicked Cinema.